So let's talk about Donald Trump. Yes, him again. It seems the former president, a man whose pronouncements often resemble a fever dream dictated by a particularly agitated eagle, has mused about Canada joining the good old US of A as the 51st state. Imagine that. One minute you're enjoying your universal healthcare and apologizing for bumping into a moose, the next, you're potentially part of a country where healthcare debates are a national sport and apologizing is, well, less mandatory. This isn't exactly a new idea, it's one of those dusty geopolitical what-ifs that gets trotted out occasionally, usually by someone who thinks a bigger map automatically means a better country, which is just demonstrably untrue. Look at Russia, huge map, currently not winning any best country to live in awards, are they? The timing of this offer, if you can even call it that, is classic Trump. It's like he has a random thought generator specifically designed to cause diplomatic awkwardness and a flurry of bewildered headlines. Why now, you ask? Perhaps he was looking at a map and thought, you know what this needs? More land, specifically land that's quite polite and has excellent maple syrup reserves. It's less a serious policy proposal and more like suggesting your quiet, sensible neighbor should move into your chaotic party house because, hey, more people, more fun, right? Except the neighbor quite likes their peace and quiet, and frankly is a bit worried about your pyrotechnics display in the living room. This recurring notion of Canadian annexation, or friendly merger, pops up with the regularity of a particularly persistent groundhog. It's been whispered about, joked about, and even seriously, though rarely successfully, campaigned for at various points in history. But when it comes from someone like Trump, it carries a different kind of weight. The weight of 1,000 confused Canadian geese suddenly wondering if they need new passports. The relevance today isn't so much about a genuine political movement towards union, but rather about how such a statement reflects a certain American worldview, one that perhaps sees borders as suggestions rather than an internationally recognized reality. It's a bit like your uncle declaring himself king of the local park. It's not going to happen, but it does tell you a lot about your uncle. Frankly, the idea of Canada becoming the 51st state is less a topic of serious diplomatic discussion, and more a fascinating thought experiment in what happens when you try to blend two distinct albeit friendly national identities. It's the geopolitical equivalent of trying to mix oil and water, or perhaps more accurately, maple syrup and, I don't know, Cheese Whiz. Both have their place, but do they really belong in the same jar, under the same label, governed by the same occasionally bewildering set of rules? It's a question that probably has most Canadians politely, but firmly saying, thanks but no thanks, eh? And honestly, who can blame them? The relationship between the United States and Canada is often described as the world's longest undefended border, which is true and lovely. It sounds like the beginning of a beautiful friendship, and in many ways, it is. But let's not forget, this bromance, as some might call it, had a rather rocky start. Remember the War of 1812, the one where Canada, then British North America, actually burned down the White House? Yes, that happened. It's like that awkward family story everyone tries to forget at Thanksgiving, but it's a crucial part of the origin story. So, while we're friendly now, there's a history there, a history of two nations forged in very different circumstances, with Canada often defining itself by what it namely American. Culturally, it's a fascinating blend of similarities and stark contrasts. Canadians and Americans consume a lot of the same media, laugh at many of the same jokes, though Canadians are statistically funnier, that's just science probably, and share a continent. Yet, ask any Canadian and they'll quickly point out the differences. There's the famed Canadian politeness, the sorry for everything, which stands in charming contrast to American, well, directness. Let's call it directness. Then there's hockey, which in Canada isn't just a sport, it's a religion, a way of life, a reason to brave sub-zero temperatures. In the US it's popular, sure, but it competes with about 17 other sports for national attention. The historical context is vital to understanding why the 51st state idea is, for most Canadians, a non-starter. Canada's journey to nationhood was a gradual evolutionary process, largely about distinguishing itself from both Britain and the United States. It was about creating a unique identity, a bilingual, multicultural mosaic under a constitutional monarchy. The American path, with its Revolutionary War and fierce assertion of independence, created a very different national character. One is a quiet evolution, the other a loud revolution. These foundational differences are deeply embedded in the national psyches of both countries, like how Americans love freedom fries, and Canadians just call them fries because, well, they're just fries. So, while we share pop culture icons, Tim Hortons, coffee cups, and an alarming number of Canadian actors who seamlessly blend into Hollywood. The idea that these two nations could simply merge ignores centuries of distinct development. It's like saying two brothers who look alike and grew up next door must therefore want to share the same house, wardrobe, and life choices. They might get along famously, borrow each other's lawnmowers, but they've built their own homes for a reason. And those reasons are woven into the very fabric of what it means to be Canadian or American, a fabric that, while occasionally overlapping, has its own unique patterns and threads. Now let's dive into the nitty-gritty. How would this theoretical merger even work from a governmental perspective? Canada operates under a parliamentary system, a constitutional monarchy with the British monarch as head of state, represented by a governor-general. The Prime Minister is the head of government, leading the party with the most seats in the House of Commons. It's all very polite, with question period being the closest they get to a prime-time reality TV brawl. The US, on the other hand, has its presidential system, a republic with a clear separation of powers, and a political climate that often feels less like a debate and more like a food fight in a suit factory. Merging these two would be an administrative Gordian knot of epic proportions. Then there's healthcare, the evergreen topic. Canada boasts a universal healthcare system, publicly funded and administered. It's a source of national pride, a cornerstone of Canadian identity. While not without its challenges like wait times, the principle is that healthcare is a right, not a privilege tied to employment or income. The US system, well, it's a system. A complex, often bewildering patchwork of private insurance, government programs like Medicare and Medicaid, and a whole lot of out-of-pocket expenses. Trying to harmonize these two approaches would be like trying to teach a moose to line dance. Confusing, probably messy, and someone's likely to get hurt. Economically, the two nations are deeply intertwined. The US-Canada trading relationship is one of the largest in the world. Canada is rich in natural resources, oil, gas, lumber, minerals, while the US has a massive diversified economy. Integrating them further might seem logical on paper to some economists, perhaps envisioning a seamless North American powerhouse. But what about regulatory differences, labor laws, environmental standards? Canada generally has more stringent environmental protections and different approaches to resource management. Would Canadian industries suddenly find themselves operating under different rules? Would American companies lobby for Canadian standards to be, let's say, streamlined? The economic implications are vast and incredibly complex, far beyond a simple bigger is better calculation. And let's not forget the little things that make a big difference. Gun control, for instance. Canada has significantly stricter gun laws than the United States. How would that play out? What about bilingualism? Canada is officially bilingual, English and French, a policy that reflects its history and cultural makeup. The US has no official language at the federal level, though English is de facto. Would French suddenly get a bigger spotlight south of the border, or would its status diminish in a larger, predominantly English-speaking entity? These aren't minor details. They are fundamental aspects of Canadian society that would face immense pressure in any unification scenario. It's a recipe for 1,000 political migraines. So, what do the experts, the people who actually study this sort of thing instead of just idly suggesting it between golf swings, think about Canada becoming the 51st state? Well, to put it mildly, most political scientists and international relations experts view the idea as highly improbable, bordering on fantastical. The legal and constitutional hurdles alone would be monumental. It would require, at the very least, a massive referendum in Canada, constitutional amendments in both countries, and the negotiation of countless treaties and agreements covering everything from provincial powers to indigenous rights. It's not like adding a new wing to a house, it's like trying to merge two entirely different architectural marvels, one of which is a castle and the other a skyscraper. From a Canadian perspective, the desirability of such a union is, to put it charitably, extremely low. Polls consistently show that an overwhelming majority of Canadians wish to remain, well, Canadian. They value their distinct social policies, their healthcare system, their relatively more peaceful and, dare I say, sensible political culture. The idea of being absorbed into the American political maelstrom with its intense polarization and, let's be honest, often baffling political theater, holds very little appeal. It would mean sacrificing a hard-won national identity for, what exactly? Cheaper shipping from Amazon? It seems like a poor trade. On the American side, while some might welcome the idea of an expanded territory and access to resources, the practicalities would be daunting. Imagine integrating 10 new states, the Canadian provinces, and 3 territories into the US Senate and House of Representatives. Think about the Electoral College implications. It would fundamentally reshape the American political landscape in ways that would make current partisan divides look like a polite disagreement over tea. There would be massive debates about representation, resource allocation, and the cultural integration of a population with different political expectations and norms. It's a can of worms so large it's more of a shipping container of worms. Ultimately, the notion of Canada as the 51st state remains firmly in the realm of speculative fiction, a curious what-if that makes for interesting if slightly alarming conversation. It highlights the unique relationship between two neighbors, closely linked, yet fiercely independent. While Mr. Trump's musings might grab headlines, the deep-seated historical, cultural and political realities suggest that the maple leaf will continue to fly proudly and distinctly alongside the stars and stripes, not as a part of it. And frankly, for the sake of poutine, politeness and parliamentary decorum, that's probably for the best. One America is quite enough, thank you very much.